Hello everyone! Thank you for visiting our channel. Have you ever experienced such like stories? When Joseph met his second wife, Sarah, he was already 40 years old. Despite the age gap of 7 years, Joseph was drawn to Sarah's beauty, with her slender figure and luxurious hair. Men turned their heads to admire her, but it was Joseph who felt flattered to have such a stunning woman by his side. His first marriage with Emily didn't work out due to her excessive drinking habit, and despite Joseph's efforts to help her, she soon returned to her old ways. Joseph decided to end the marriage, and his 22-year-old son, William, followed him. William had recently graduated from university and was now interning at a new developing company. Joseph had to work hard to establish his own workshop, where he spent long hours to save money and make a name for himself. But now, the workshop ran smoothly without his constant presence, and Joseph was planning to open a second branch on the other side of the city. Joseph met Sarah through a business partner who brought several girls to a party. Sarah stood out to Joseph, and they got married a year and a half later. Joseph knew he couldn't let such a beautiful and attractive woman slip away, and Sarah appreciated that her future husband had money and could fulfill her every whim. The wedding was grand and lavish, and Sarah was granted every desire. She boasted to her friends about the man she had secured for herself. Sarah didn't want to burden herself with household chores, and Joseph often had to eat reheated food from cafes. However, as their third wedding anniversary approached, Joseph broached the topic of having a child with Sarah. He wanted to relive the experience of being a father with his beloved wife. Sarah initially refused, citing concerns about her figure and time constraints. But Joseph persisted and eventually convinced her to have a child. Sarah requested her husband, Joseph, for a vacation with her friends at the seaside. But Joseph declined. "You've never refused me before," Sarah protested in anger. "I want to go to the seaside. We can go together." Joseph responded calmly, like a python. "I don't want to go together. I want to go with my friends. Why is it okay for everyone else, but not for me?" Sarah stormed out of the room and slammed the door with such force that the walls trembled. Joseph knew all of his wife's provocations but decided to hold his ground. His intuition told him that he was doing the right thing. After that day, Sarah began to hang out with her friends frequent nightclubs, and Joseph often had to pick her up in a state of madness. It was just another one of her provocations. She knew the reason for Joseph's divorce from his first wife and was doing it to spite him. "My little silly girl," said Joseph as he stroked his sleeping wife's head. He carried her into the apartment, helped her undress, and tucked her into bed. In the morning, he left for work before Sarah woke up. As he arrived at the workshop, his phone rang and he saw his wife's name on the screen. Joseph silenced his phone and decided to teach his wife a lesson. One evening, Joseph's son called and stated that he had forgotten his tablet at the auto shop and needed it for work the next day. When asked why William couldn't pick it up himself, the son admitted that he was at a bar with a girl and couldn't leave. Joseph chuckled and wished him luck on his date. Upon arriving at work, Joseph heard some noises, but he ignored them. The station was on the first floor of a garage complex, and the sound insulation was not ideal, with many neighbors nearby. From the window, Joseph noticed his business partner's car parked in the customer parking lot, the same partner who introduced him to Sarah. Joseph attempted to call David, but he was unreachable. Joseph believed that David had merely parked his vehicle there and left by taxi to unwind at a restaurant. The sounds Joseph heard before repeated, and he assumed they came not from behind the wall, but from his office. Puzzled, he approached the door and opened it suddenly. In the dim light, he saw the outline of two figures. Joseph fumbled for the light switch on the wall and was stunned to see his wife lying on the table with David standing over her with his pants down. Joseph's mind was in turmoil, and an array of thoughts raced through his head. Suddenly, he bellowed and pounced on David, grabbing him by the chest. Sarah, in panic, retreated to a corner and crouched down. "You," Joseph growled, forcefully pinning David against the wall. Although Joseph was disadvantaged in weight, David was too dazed to resist. "Don't you have enough girls of your own? And you think this one isn't mine?" David sneered, informing Joseph that he had been invisibly present in their family life for the past year, unbeknownst to Joseph, of course. "It's all because of you," Sarah chimed in from the corner. "You wouldn't let me go to the sea with my friends back then. That's why I started going to clubs and being mean to you. That's where I sometimes met David, and one of those encounters turned out to be fateful." Joseph let go of David with a heavy breath. He finally put on his pants and left without a word, leaving Sarah standing in the corner clutching her purse. Her dress was wrinkled, her makeup smeared, and her lipstick had faded beyond the lines of her lips. She looked pitiful. Pointing towards the door, Joseph ordered, "Get out, and don't come back. I'll take all your things to your mother's myself." He was overwhelmed with emotions, from anger and fury to self-pity. Inwardly, he longed to break something or hit someone. However, David had already fled, and Sarah was beyond his reach. Joseph later reflected on what had transpired, and he was grateful that his lawyer had urged him and Sarah to sign a prenuptial agreement. This meant that his future ex-wife would be left with nothing. She came with one suitcase of belongings and would leave with only that. It was a definite advantage in this situation. William, Joseph's son, felt guilty for having sent his father to the workshop that evening, but Joseph consoled him. He was pleased that everything had come to light. Who knew how long Sarah would have continued deceiving her husband and extorting money from him? Following the divorce, Sarah hoped that David would take her back, marry her, and start a family. But David was genuinely surprised to hear this. He had never intended to live with her, let alone marry her. He was content with his enviable bachelor status. Any woman who realized that David had money would cling to him and be willing to do anything he asked. He laughed in Sarah's face and offered the only option possible, for her to continue being one of many, and he would support her. Sarah, who had never worked a day in her life, had no other option but to agree. She lived as his mistress, but David was not like a husband. He did not just hand her money or comply with her every wish. Sarah remained deeply unhappy. At some point, she missed her ex-husband terribly, but he had moved on with his life and didn't care about the woman who had betrayed him. Sarah's short-sightedness and vindictiveness had played a cruel trick on her. After all, secrets eventually come to light. What do you think about this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. And thank you for listening to the story until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and be sure to like this video, as it will help us promote the channel. All the best.